right. Well, we have spent several weeks looking at the Lord's Prayer and kind of summarized a little bit last week and made some application of how we can pray that prayer. We want to spend now a few weeks looking at kind of Jesus and how He prayed this, would have lived out and prayed this prayer. We'll specifically look at John 17 in a few weeks, so we will look at that prayer, I promise. But I thought, when you're learning how to do something, you've got to learn the knowledge, right? You got to learn, first of all, you do have to learn the nuts and bolts, so to speak. You have to be competent in what you're being asked to do, right? And that'll usually involve what? You have to go maybe and get some what? Get some training. You've got to read. How about watch videos? You ever had to watch videos for something and you go, okay, another video. But sometimes you watch something and you go, that was a good thing. That was a good point that they made. I learned something about that they talked about. Of course, in school, whether it's college or a trade school or, you've got to get that. But at some point, really the best way you learn is what? Okay, doing it. But no. Actually, that's not right. That is right, but that's not. What do you need to often look at? Who do you need to look at? An example, someone who's doing it what? Doing it correctly. And you ever done that in your job? You ever watched somebody who did their job well? And if you're smart, what will you do? You'll do what they do, but what else specifically? Copy them, you'll imitate, how about this? Ask questions. Oh, yeah. Hey, tell me how you did that. Show me when you did this, how did you? The worst thing you can do is someone's telling you how to do something. Okay, I get it. I know sometimes, you get it, you're ready to do it, but most of the time, we're not ready to do it, right, when we start something. And so we need to ask questions. We need to observe and learn by watching and learning from someone who has done something well. Yes, go ahead. Yeah. But I always watched everything. Yeah. And so when we think about prayer, we can learn and it's important. We've talked about our Father, right? We've talked about the order matters. The praise to God and the acknowledgement of God's will and our purpose and kind of being centered around that. And the provisions that we ask for and the deliverance that we need and the praying for others not to be. We need to learn how to pray, but we also need to see example. And Jesus, we see that. We see that powerfully. And so that's kind of what I want to do here is kind of think about and there are all kinds of great prayers. There are great prayers and there are great prayers and in the Bible. And Jesus would be at the very top of that list. I was thinking about this week. Jesus' relationship with God was so, we think about that. Is there anything that Jesus had available in growing and maturing his relationship and strengthening his walk with God the Father that we don't have available? Yes. Think about that. Yes. Yeah. He had already been in heaven and he had his word. Sure. He brought that with him. Right. But in his humanity, if he's going to draw closer to God, is there anything he has that we don't have, that we can't do? Now, see, the deity of Christ has often swamped the humanity of Christ. And we forget he was 100% human, like us. He wasn't 90%, and then the rest. He was 100% human, 100% God, as Kathy talked about. And if he's going to grow in his walk with God, his relationship with God, spiritually strengthen himself, there's nothing that he had available, access, that we don't have access to. Everything he's doing, growing his relationship with God the Father, we see we can do. Yeah, Matt? Yeah, absolutely, Matt. Yes. He had to put into practice the things that strengthened him, that drew him closer to God the Father. It did not just come naturally. And I think that, when you get into him being filled with the Holy Spirit and him being able to, perform the miracles that he did, of course, with his deity, that the Spirit of God was in him and upon him as God, but he grew in his spiritual walk. And so I just, thinking about that, thinking about his prayer life, there's nothing that Jesus did or had access to, so to speak, in drawing close to God the Father that we don't have when it comes to prayer. And that's incredible to think about. And so we can learn from his example in this regard. So we're going to look at a couple of just general things here. Some will be specific, but just about his prayer life. And then we're going to swing back around in a week or two, and we will look at some specifics in his prayer we'll mention something a little bit here this morning, but I want to come back to a couple of prayers of Jesus towards the end here in a few weeks. But so here's a couple things. Just think about Jesus' prayer life. And let's start with some obvious basic stuff. But the obvious basic stuff, how often does that get people in trouble, right? When they overlook, ignore the obvious. And so Jesus took time to pray. Oh, Robert, what a great insight you've given us this morning, right? We never knew that. Why is that important? That he took time to pray. It was a priority. Did he have other things to do? A little bit. He was just a little busy, right? You think you're busy, right? How much do you have to accomplish this week? Let me tell you what all Jesus had to accomplish in 3.5 years. He had to save the world, right? And all of that was involved in that. Look at Luke chapter 5 and verse 16. Luke chapter 5 and verse 16. Luke gives us he gives emphasis to Jesus' prayer life more than any other of the gospel writers. And you see that here, that Jesus had time set aside for communion with the Father, fellowship with God. Someone get Luke 5, verse 15 and 16. Who's got that for us? Okay, Matt. Okay, often, there, Luke 5 and verse 16. Yeah, he often would do that, and that was a regular part of his prayer life. He took those moments and set aside the time to do that. The significance of that, again, we talked about he had a lot to accomplish. But is he going to get what he needs done if he's not strengthening that relationship with God the Father? I mean, it sounds so basic, so elementary that we think, but how often do we try to live our Christian lives without staying connected to God in prayer. And it's easy to lose focus on that, isn't there? Because there's so much to do, so much to accomplish. We've got so many distractions. And it's easy to do that. You know, we've got, they used to call these kind of, the technology was early on was called labor-saving devices. Now, there's some truth to that. There certainly is. You know, it's nice to be away and not have to run back physically to the office, right? It's good. Email. Some of you have been out fishing, right? Some of you have been out vacationing, and oops, that's right, I was supposed to send that real quick. Boom. Labor-saving devices. You don't have to what? Physically go back and get, okay, I get that. But in another sense, labor-saving devices, this thing is just giving us more labor and busyness often. And so there's so many what? Distractions. So many distractions. How do we push through those? How do we see the priority of what's real important? You've got to make it priority? Do what? Go ahead, yeah, Sochi. What you're saying, it seems like, is you have to value that, right? If you don't value it, I mean, do you spend a lot of time with things that you don't value? I mean, really, when you get down to it, I mean, I know there's things we have to do sometimes, and yeah, I get all that, but if you don't have any value in it, or you're not going to do it. You're not going to, you know, you might start it, and after a while, be like, this isn't important to me. Yeah, Matt. Yeah. That's right. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Matt.
But if you couple verse 15 with 16,
Mm-hmm.
and you look at it, and as a preacher, anybody who's been interactive with a bunch of people, and all you hear is help me, I need.
Right.
That gets draining after a while.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that gets tiring. I mean, there comes a time where you're like, I'm more than happy to help you, but you can do for yourself to a certain extent.
Yeah. Yeah, you just think about how draining physically, mentally, emotionally it was on Jesus. And even here in the text, it's almost like, and you find this a few times in the Gospels where, boy, Jesus is just a big hit. And he's like, hey, let's go over here and pray. And we would be like, what? Hey, that's not the time to what? Go on a vacation, so to speak. Take a sabbatical for a week. I mean, we got to strike while the what? Iron's hot. We got to keep pushing. We just go, 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 go. And Jesus knew what? Go, 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 go will what spiritually? It'll burn you out. Have you seen it? Yeah, you've seen it. And prayer is a part of that, reconnecting with God. Years ago, there was a story told of a European who visited America in the 1800s. And he came back to Europe, and they were asking, well, what impressed you about the Americans? What'd you think? And he said, those Americans are always moving. They can't sit still. They've even invented a chair. They call it the rocking chair. They just can't sit still, right? There has to be time to sit still and to pause and to stop and to take time for God. And so, how that looks for you when you can see that in your life being rushed. And remember, Jesus calls us to quietness, to solitude, and getting away with God. And so he made time for prayer. And that was a choice he made as something that he needed. Yeah, Marcia? Yeah. Anybody that we're close to, a spouse, a good friend, that relationship is strengthened by spending time with each other and developing that bond. And so Jesus took time to pray. Now, another thing here about Jesus' prayer life, he designated place or places to pray. Look at Mark chapter 1. Mark chapter 1. This is an incredible 24 hours in the life. You want a 24 hours in the life of Jesus? Look at Mark chapter 1 sometime. And it is boom, 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 boom in this section. And here he's in Capernaum, and he is staying at, he's been teaching, he's been casting out evil spirits, he's been healing, and he's at the home of Peter's house, actually with his mother-in-law. And this was kind of his home. So remember, I've preached some sermons a couple of weeks ago on Bethany. Jesus, Lazarus, Mary, Martha was what? In Bethany. That was kind of his home base when he was down in Judea and Jerusalem. Bethany's 2 miles out of Jerusalem. When he's up in Galilee, particularly in Capernaum, home base is Peter's house. And that seems to be where he's at. And Peter is here, and his mother-in-law is in bed with fever. And he's going to heal her. And it says in verse 32, after he does that, this word got out, right? Sunset, they brought all to Jesus, all the sick, demon-possessed. Verse 33, the whole town gathered at the door. And Jesus healed many who had can you imagine the stress, the exhaustiveness, how exhaustive he must have been physically, mentally. The whole town shows up. And Jesus drove many demons out. It says that after, notice I want you to see there, verse 32, after sunset. So what we would say, what? Dark? He goes into the night, at least. Now somebody read verse 35 of Mark 1. Okay, Kathy?
Now in the morning, having risen a long while before daylight, he went out and departed to a solitary place, and there he prayed.
All right, let's put it together. He's up all day working, healing, teaching, casting out demons, goes home to Peter's house, heals his mother-in-law. The whole town says, hey, I've got a sick family member too. They start bringing their sick. He stays after dark, after sunset, and heals. You'd think that's time to next morning, let's sleep in a little bit and get some rest, right, Jesus? No, we talked about he made time to pray, but what does he also do? He doesn't just stay right there in the house, right? What's he do?
He leaves and goes off by himself, so there aren't any distractions.
Yeah, there aren't any distractions. Matter of fact, he's going to be out there, and look at Simon, boy, the apostles, Simon, his companions went to look for him. You ever been that way where you try to just get away? You're hiding in the break room, your office with the door closed, lights off, the blinds closed, right? Maybe under your table. Anybody that desperate where you get under your desk, like one of them old sitcom shows? And you just can't escape. How about a mom, right? A grandparents that you just can't get away from them when you're trying to get a little break. And here's Simon, here's they come out to him, and everyone's looking for you. And Jesus is going to be able to have his focus and says, hey, we need to go on to the next place so I can preach. That's why I've come. Where did he get that perspective? Where did he get that focus? Why didn't he get distracted and say, yeah, this is great. Let's just stay here another day or two or a week. He'd been praying, getting himself, back with God. But he had a place. Again, why is that important? Do what? It's familiar. What else? Why is that important? Maybe a place. It helped cause you to have a habit? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let's think about a place.
But if you think about what Jesus is going through, it's not like he's going to just, it talks in the book of Acts about the apostles walking by and just their shadow falling on people healing. But Jesus never seemed to actually do that. Jesus always seemed to, he would stop, or from at least what I
Right.
You know, he was constantly trying to learn more about him. I mean, that's
Yeah.
taxing. That's mentally.
No, yeah. Yeah. You go ahead. Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. What was that? Yeah. Yeah, and you see that with this. I think that there's strength in a familiar place. You know, Jeff had mentioned, someone mentioned, there's a habit that's developed. There's, you know, what was when he's in Jerusalem, his favorite place to go off and pray is going to be where? The Mount Olives. Where's he going to go right before he goes to the cross? He's going to go to the garden, which was his go-to spot, the Gospels tell us. This was the place he often withdrew, to the Garden of Gethsemane. And there was familiarity, there was strength, just in finding that place, and to have that. And so, you know, that might be for you. That might be a couple of places. Obviously, Jesus, you know, he could find a spot anywhere. He had certain designated places like the Garden of Gethsemane when he was in Jerusalem, but he found time to get away. He found time to escape the distractions. We know he can't even get away here this early morning because Peter and we're looking for you. So we don't know how long he had, maybe an hour, maybe two, I'm not sure, but either way, he had time to get away and to refocus. And so he had time. He made time, and he made a place. Now, here's another thing about Jesus' prayer life. Now, this is, again, I mean, all these I'm giving to you so far, you're going, boy, Robert, tell us something we didn't know, right? Let me give you another one. You probably, Robert. Jesus prayed out loud. Now, we understand that silent prayer is great. Mentally, if you will, but you're just praying in your mind. And there are times that it is inappropriate to pray out loud in certain instances. It would just not be. And so we understand that. However, there's really never an inappropriate time to pray silently, but there are times that it's inappropriate to pray out loud, but we need to pray. Look here at Matthew. Look at Matthew 26. Let's look at a couple of examples. Matthew 26. You say, Robert, what's the significance? Maybe there's no significance. I don't know. I think there is. Go ahead, Kathy.
Trying to learn something and you're reading it and it's confusing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, especially if they learn better through auditory, read it out loud because they're getting it two ways. They're seeing it and they're hearing it, and that helps them
You're
learn it.
exactly what I was going to mention, and kind of to build on what Kathy's saying, as we'll read these scriptures here in a minute. Have you ever had this problem when you're praying silently? Literally. Have you ever fallen asleep praying silently? Now, it doesn't mean you're not going to fall asleep if you say it out loud, but the chances are a little higher. What? How about this one? You're praying silently in your mind only, and it seems like you're distracted. You know? When you're concentrating on the words, saying the words, you're hearing the words, there's focus there. Dusty, another hand, Dusty? Yeah.
Sometimes I let my mind wander a little bit when I'm praying.
Yeah.
And I don't do that. I'll never do it again, but I do it.
Yeah. No, yeah, we're all humans, and I mean, it's gonna happen. And so I think there's some significance here that Jesus, look here in Matthew 26, and he's praying, and they are. He says to them. And, you see the emphasis here in the words that he says. I mean, he's going to say here 3 times, remember? Father, if it's possible, let this cup be taken away from me. And verse 42, when he went a second time, he prayed, or the word there is he said. This would be more. Then verse 44, so he went away once more and prayed, saying. The idea there is he spoke these words. He prayed out loud. You have an occasion in Luke chapter 11. Look at Luke chapter 11 here real quick. Luke chapter 11. The whole context of why the disciples asked him to teach them to pray. Luke 11, verse 1, one day Jesus was praying in a certain, place. We've talked about that, right? When he finished, one of his disciples said to him, teach us to pray. So he's praying silently. They're not observing and learning really anything, are they? What were they able to, why were they asking this question about teach us to pray? What were they hearing? Go on, you can say it. They were hearing him. He was doing it. He was saying it. The words. We just spent several weeks on when you pray, this is how you pray, our Father. What did they hear regularly coming out of his mouth? Words of what? Praise to God the Father. What an impact. And if it's all just, if that's our prayer life, and so this is the catalyst for them wanting to be taught. And so that's when Luke gives us his account. When you pray, say this. The emphasis there is on the words. Let me give you another example here real quickly. Hebrews chapter 5. I mentioned Matthew 26. Let me give you the little more detail that the Hebrew writer gives us about Jesus in the garden. Hebrews 5, and somebody get verse 7 and 8. Hebrews 5, 7 and 8. Okay?
While Jesus lived on earth, he prayed to God, asking for help from the one who could save him from death. He prayed to God with loud cries and tears, and his prayers were answered because of his great respect for God. Jesus was the Son of God, but he still suffered, and through his sufferings he learned to obey whatever God says.
Okay, by the way, that verse is huge on what we were talking about at the start of class. He had to learn, right, Matt? We've talked about. He learned obedience to the Father. There's nothing Jesus had access to that we don't have access to in growing our faith spiritually. That's what we were talking about. But the point here is he cried out with what? With these words, these expressions. He was saying them. We can leave it, and that's where we're tempted to in our minds to kind of just, I think there's something powerful about specifically saying something and saying it out loud. There's some things that people just don't ever want to utter the word. They don't ever want to say the word. They don't ever want to, they just don't want to say it. But there's power in our words. And I think that's what we see here. Jesus himself used words. He spoke out loud is what I'm saying here. And there's significance there for us, I think, in that. Yeah, Jeff? Wow. Yeah. There are so many people, you'd be surprised, who've never had their name specifically mentioned in prayer. That shocked me several years ago when I started to kind of observe that. Sometimes they come from religious traditions and backgrounds where the prayers are all rote, right? You recite the Lord's Prayer. Again, Lord's Prayer, wonderful. but we need to be specific too in that prayer. And so saying someone's name, mentioning specifically the situation, using our words, not just kind of in our minds only. Jesus was doing. Okay, quickly here. We got to quickly. Jesus also prayed with gratitude. Now, again, all of these you're going, Robert, these are pretty. I didn't know that. Yeah, right. You knew all these. So he prayed with gratitude. Whenever he broke bread, he always gave thanks. Mark chapter 6 and verse 41, the feeding of the 5,000, the feeding of the 4,000, Mark chapter 8 and verse 6. Mark 14, 22 and 23 in the upper room. We talked about give us this day our daily bread, right? But the flip side, kind of on the back side of that, is when God's provided, what should we be doing? We should be thanking Him. Why is that important? You're acknowledging the source. Oh, I went out and worked. I grew it. I kind of did it all, really, right? We can start thinking like that, can't we? Yeah. Who gave you the mind? Who gave you the dirt? There we go. Let's start with the basic. Who gave you the dirt? The source. So important, because if not, lest we get the big head, right? And it's always our thought. And let me tell you something. I used to kind of, and I don't know if it was kind of taught this way some. I hope it wasn't, but I'm not sure. Maybe it was a little bit. It was almost like we always left it with, well, Jesus was just showing us an example. No. Well, yes, but no. He was actually thankful that God gave him that bread that day. Do you understand what I'm saying? We act like Jesus just walked around, he could just always make bread and do whatever he wanted. No, his miracles always was by the direction of the Holy Spirit. The apostles are the same way. They don't just walk around touching things, making it bread. That's not how it worked. Jesus actually, when they went out fishing, when they went out and provided, and when Jesus worked growing up as a carpenter, son of a carpenter, when that bread was put on the table, they actually gave what? Thanks. This wasn't, well, he's just setting a good example for us. No, he is acknowledging, I would not eat if it wasn't for what? God. Now you think about that. That'll change your perspective a little bit with Jesus. He's not just setting a good example. He's doing that. Of course he's doing that. But he's actually acknowledging the source. I would not have this if it was not for the Father. And that is so critical for us in regard to attitude. And so every meal should be a reminder. Every occasion where the Lord provides should be a reminder of the goodness of God. And any thoughts on that as far as what the gratitude? Yeah, go ahead, Jeff. And there's just something, that is, and it's not that God ego has to be stroked. This is not about, well, God he feels slighted if we don't. Yes, but this is for our benefit by acknowledging the one who gives us all things. Yeah, Judd, or Matt, I'm sorry, in the back there. One of you. Yeah. And gratitude can really change a person, can't it? Have you been changed by something that you were so grateful for? Have you had an experience where someone has done something? We've talked about with Maggie and I, with our family, her family, with her dad. There's several people that we've just been like, it's had an impact on us. That gratitude that we feel, and it changes us, and we want to express that, and we want to show that love. This is just not a matter of, well, it's just good to tell God thank you for your blessings. I mean, no, this is transformational, gratitude is. And Jesus, let me tell you something. How easy would it have been for Jesus if he's just like us? I've already established that point. He is just like us in the flesh as we are. How easy would it have been for him to get a little bit of the big head? You think it's easy for you? Some of you have done well in your jobs. Good for you. I mean that. Good for you. Have you done what Jesus has done? Have you ever touched something and healed somebody? Have you ever told the storm to be quiet and it stops? I mean, think about what we've done and then compare it to what Jesus has done. Now you tell me who could have the big head easy. Yeah, raise someone from the dead. Okay? What does gratitude do? It grounds him. It keeps him grounded. See, we got to think in terms of Jesus being like us, or we just we make him this kind of non-relatable. He's our example because he had to have this and he had to live this out in his flesh. And so he prayed with gratitude. Well, we've got a few others. We're going to have to stop because I want to spend some time on 2 or 3 others here about his prayer life. And then we're going to look at some specific prayers in a couple of weeks, I promise. So looking at his prayer life. All right, we'll pick up there next time.